Hello, pre-calculus students. This is our first video covering chapters 4 and 5. The rest of the semester is going to be on trigonometry. So you have the blank packet on Blackboard and it's also filled in, but I'm going to be going through the basically front and back of the first page, the 4.3 and 4.8 notes. This will probably be broken up into 2 videos. We'll see how long this takes me. So the first thing we need to always talk about with trigonometry is SOHCAHTOA. That is just telling us the 3 trig functions. The S stands for sine. Sine is the opposite, that's what the O is, over the hypotenuse. That's what the H is. So that is what the sine function does. It takes the opposite over the hypotenuse, and a reminder that is only in right triangles. We're only talking about right triangles right now. The cosine, the C, is the adjacent side over the hypotenuse. And lastly, T stands for tangent. The tangent is the opposite over the adjacent. Now remember, these are only with right triangles. Let me bring up another window here. So I'm only talking about right triangles at this point. And really that's what we're going to be focusing on this entire chapter. The opposite, adjacent, and all that stuff are in reference to an angle. So let's say the angle I care about is this little angle here, this acute angle. I'm going to call it alpha. The opposite means the side that is opposite from that angle. So this will be considered the opposite side. The adjacent, now technically 2 sides are adjacent. This one side is adjacent, and this second side is also adjacent to that angle. But the hypotenuse, we specifically call hypotenuse. So when I'm saying adjacent, the next to that angle, that would be the adjacent side. And the hypotenuse is obviously the hypotenuse of the right triangle. So just make sure we know that. So those are 3 main trig functions that you've done before. The reciprocal functions are somewhat less known, but we will need them a lot in this unit. The first one, CSC, that is the cosecant. That is 1 over the sine. Now you got to be careful with this, that the sine goes with the cosecant. It doesn't sound like they should match each other, but they do. The secant is 1 over the cosine. So again, these sound wrong. Sine sounds like it should go with secant, but it doesn't. Sine goes with cosecant. Secant goes with cosine. The last one, at least, is fairly easy. Cotangent is 1 over tangent, which basically means we flip the fraction. That's the idea of a reciprocal function. We'll deal much more with the reciprocal functions later on. Those are technically identities, and we'll get several more identities as we go through this unit, whether that is in person or online. We'll see how the semester ends up. So we're going to focus pretty much all our efforts today on SOHCAHTOA trigonometry. I learned just how to spell it, SOHCAHTOA, but you may have heard other things. My favorite is I heard a little story that some old hippie caught another hippie tripping on acid. So if that helps, use it. So our first problems here are dealing with basic right triangle trig. We need to figure out which trig function we want to use. So on number 1, I look at my angle that I'm given, okay, 34 degrees, and I look at the information I need and what I was told as far as side lengths. I'm asked to find the adjacent side. That's going to be the adjacent in SOHCAHTOA. I am given the hypotenuse. So the trig function that uses adjacent hypotenuse is cosine. So I can set up a cosine equation here. This is going to be cosine of the angle, 34 degrees, is adjacent, which is lowercase b, over hypotenuse, which is 220. And then I just solve this equation for the variable, which is b. All I'd have to do is multiply by 220. I'll make a little x. I'll go old-fashioned. That's the best way to do my multiplication sign there. So they'd cancel over there. Now realize on your calculator, you're going to make sure you are in degrees. Chat with me during office hours. Look it up online if you don't know how to make sure you are in degrees. Chances are your calculator will say D or DEG. If you have a graphing calculator, you'll probably have to go into the mode menu. But you'll multiply 220 times the cosine of 34 degrees, and you should end up with an answer of about 182.39, and that was a side length inches. For letter B, again, I got to figure out what trig function am I going to use, sine, cosine, or tangent. So from my angle, I have opposite, that's the O, and I'm looking for hypotenuse. So opposite hypotenuse, that's the sine function. So sine of the angle is the opposite, 16, over the hypotenuse, which is C. Now be careful here. Sometimes students get in the mode of, oh, I should just multiply over 16. Do not do this, because if I do that, the 16s aren't canceling out. I have to actually think of this as a two-step process, and it's going to be the same two-step process, so you'll probably get used to how it works in just after a few steps. But I need to multiply, keep forgetting to draw an X for multiplying. I need to multiply by C, so that comes over to the other side. And now to get sine by itself, to get C by itself, I need to divide out sine 23. So I divide out sine 23 degrees. So that'll cancel over here. And so actually I'm doing 16 divided by the sine of 23 degrees, which gives me about 40.95. Ooh, that's a terrible 5 meters. Good thing you can look on the filled in notes online, because this is not going to be written very well. On the next couple problems, we are solving the right triangle. On these, this is basically asking for all the information. Basically, whatever's not told to me, I find out. So these are basically going to always come out one of two ways. Either I give you two angles. In this case, I am giving you two angles, 34.5 and 90, and one side, 10.5. Or the next problem, I give you one angle, the 90, and two sides, which are given in the problem. So there'll be one of those two. But when it says solve the triangle, I need to find out all the other information. So on 2A, I can pick anything I want to solve for first, but easiest would just be to find my missing angle, B. I know the angles in a triangle add up to 180. Add up the 34.5 and the 90, subtract from 180, and you'll figure out angle B equal 55.5. And again, this is an angle this time, so that's degrees. Okay, so that part's done. Now, I could use that angle that I just found for later calculations, but since I found it, I'm weary to use it. Because if it's wrong, everything else is going to be wrong. So I'm going to go back to the given angle, 34.5. And let's say I want to solve for lowercase a now. Well, that is opposite. And the side length that I know is the 10.5, which is the adjacent. So opposite adjacent is going to be a tangent problem. So tangent 34.5 is opposite, which is side A, over adjacent, which is 10.5. And this is one of the simple ones. I just multiply the 10.5 over. I just multiply this over. And I get lowercase a equal to about 7.22. Now, at this point, I do have 2 of 3 sides on a right triangle. You could think, oh, maybe I'll use Pythagorean theorem. I would warn against that because I rounded that answer. So it could mess up the final answer, and I might be wrong in the first place. So I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to use trig again. So I still need to find lowercase side c. Well, from my angle, 34.5. Again, I have the adjacent. Side C is the hypotenuse. So this would be a cosine problem. So this is going to be cosine 34.5 is adjacent 10.5 over hypotenuse C. Now, again, this is one of those where it's technically a two-stepper. I'd have to multiply the C, side C over, oh, can't see all that, C over there. Let's try that again. I have to multiply the side C over here, so that would cancel it out. And then I'd have to divide out cosine 34.5. And I'd divide that out on the other side. I'm just going to put quotes. Divide out the cosine 34.5. So again, what I'm really doing, I'll go ahead and write it out, make this cleaner, is 10.5 divided by the cosine of 34.5. And that'll give me side C, which is about 12.74. All right, I'll stop here for this first video because I was told to cut my videos down into smaller chunks. So this will just be the first part of probably 2 or 3.